The bench was 23 for New York and 7 for you guys, and obviously you had some different people in different places with Caitlin out, but is New York that much tougher when they're getting 23 points off the bench? And I think they were, I guess, 9 for 13 from the field. So.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it is. It's tough when you're getting that kind of production, when you have that kind of depth. But the thing that stood out to me was the last 3 minutes of the third and the first 2 to 3 minutes of the fourth, where they went on like a 16 or 18 to 3 run. You can't allow that to happen against championship caliber teams. And different than their early run, it was poor shot selection, turnovers that they got some easy buckets and got runouts for, ways that we weren't able to set our defense. I thought early in the ball game we were getting high quality shots that weren't going in. We knew when they were coming, and so we could set our defense. And that run really stood out to me. I was looking at the turnovers. 20 points off of turnovers. You can't give that to great teams, and 20 points from the free throw line. I mean, that's 40 points right there.
She felt like in the second half you guys didn't feel them as much on the defensive end. Agree with that assessment?
That they didn't feel us as much? Yeah. I mean, I thought we got a little soft. I thought we got a little soft. We weren't as disruptive. We were switching flat in our switches. We were allowing them to just ping the ball around the perimeter freely without being in passing lanes. And you've got to disrupt really good offensive teams. I felt like we did a pretty good job of that in the first half, and in the second half, not as good.
Natasha mentioned not knowing personnel kind of tonight, and that's something, Kelsey and Sophie have also mentioned in previous losses. Just, has that become an issue in games, or how is that something you fix?
I don't know if it's not knowing as much as having awareness when you're on there. In transition, you get matched up, cross-matched oftentimes. If you quiz them on the scouting report, they know it. But recognizing it in live action, understanding, again, like what we're willing to live with, playing tendencies. Because at the end of the day, players make plays. And you have to make them make difficult plays. And that's, not letting players who like to drive left, right? Make them go right. Not allowing wide open catch and shoot threes to 3-point shooters, making them put the ball on the floor, disrupting their rhythm, their timing. It's just learning and having that awareness when it's not predetermined by a dead ball.
This team was pegged as a contender, coming into the season with the talent, the depth on this roster, and obviously you guys have dealt with injury and roster changes, but what do you think is missing right now from really allowing that to click, that competition with the upper echelon to click on a consistent basis?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's for everybody else to discuss whether we were really ready to be a contender or not. Certainly there's no substitute for experience, and Tosh and Sid are the ones on our team that have championship caliber experience, and so you got to go through it. I do think, disruption in rotation, playing players in different positions because of that disruption hasn't allowed the continuity probably as much as we'd like. But you can see it in spurts, right? You can see it in certain spurts where we have that. And so being able to, the difference in championship caliber teams are those 2 or 3 minutes in a ball game. Where you can't have the miscommunications, you can't have the breakdowns, you can't have the poor shot selection, playing outside yourself, whatever it may be. Games and series are won and lost in those small margins. And right now, we might have moments, and it might be 30 minutes a game, it might be 38 minutes a game, but those 2 minutes matter. And we've got to get to the point where we're not having those moments and those lulls.
Obviously it's tough because of all the turnover and Caitlin being in and out, but to what you were just discussing, when do you think you might have an idea of what this team can be or is and are comfortable stating that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's not something I have an answer to. I think we've had moments, and again, I know it sounds corny to hear the same thing over and over, but It is consistency. You know, we had moments early in the season when Caitlin was on the floor, especially where we were getting lots of production from our bench. Now we've got, you know, players who are coming off the bench in our starting lineup. Certainly we have different personnel than we had. You know, we've got players that are playing at some times based on certain matchups or certain players that we have available playing out of position. And we might not. You know, we might not with disruptions, but we got to figure out, you know, how to maintain consistency with what we have. And again, that goes to those lulls. I mean, that 16-3 or 18-3 run, whatever it may be, into the third, start of the fourth, that's the difference in the ballgame. And we've got to have that sense of urgency at all times for 40 minutes. Thank you.
For both of you, just what was the difference in that second half? It seemed like in the last 5 minutes of the third quarter and most of the fourth, they seemed more confident on offense and were better defensively.
I feel like they didn't really feel us in the second half how they felt us in the first half. And we was just taking quick shots on offense, and it led to them getting easy buckets on the offensive end. And, and we really didn't pay attention to the personnel. We kind of struggled with that, but New York is a really good team. They're a championship team for a reason.
Coming into the season, there were, you know, contender aspirations. I'm curious how far you guys think you are from getting kind of back to that position and clicking in that way.
Well, if nobody else been believing this, I do. So I think that we're a contender. I'm gonna ride and die with the 11 or 12 that we have. And I think when it comes to being a contender, you know, we got to keep playing the best. You don't know what none of this is like until you play the best, and New York is one of the best. And so they got the standard, they hold the standard, and if you want to keep being in the contender conversation, that's where we got to be, like where they are. And I think that for us, we got to keep using these experiences to keep getting better.
Kelsey, to that point, you know, it was the end of the third quarter, fourth quarter, got away from you guys, but you really were scoring early. What was working then that you think you could apply in the future to beat that contender status?
I think that you have to make their best players be uncomfortable. Sabrina's great for a reason, Stewie's great for a reason, but all great players got to feel discomfort. And I think down the stretch of the third and fourth, they were comfortable. They didn't really feel us. We weren't busting up the plays like we was in the first half. It was just a lot that kind of fell off. But I think that don't mean that we don't belong. I think, and if anybody got a chance to be a contender and sneak and win games, it's the Fever. And so I'm going to keep believing that.
Yeah, you guys have had those second half breakdowns, you know, a few times this season, you know, against the Valkyries and against Aces on the road. Just what has it been that, you know, we can't maintain those leads in the second half?
Coming out at halftime, we got to just stay consistent how we was in the first half. And that's the thing that we still growing right there, is staying consistent for 40 minutes. When we stay consistent for 40 minutes, we could be able to come out with wins like this. But when we get to that point right there of being consistent, coming out the same way we did in the first half, it'll be a different ball game. So that's one thing that we still growing and still learning, is staying consistent.
So Sophie's used the phrase like standards over feelings a bunch in describing, you know, being applied to consistency. I guess, does this result feel any different than, you know, any other kind of game that you guys have played this year, or does it feel like you're kind of having the same conversation?
I don't know. I don't think that it's the same conversation from the last New York game to this New York game. I think we can all agree that this was a better game. I think that we can all agree that we had people in the SJ seats because the game was a great game and we made it tough and we mucked it up enough to be in this game. I think it's more about figuring out what kind of pro you want to be to win. And I think that standard is over feelings, and Soph was right about that. And so, like I said, New York got the standard. And if that's the standard, we got to stay out our feelings. And if we want to be the best, we got to compete and beat the best.
You guys are both vets in this league, and obviously coming out of the All-Star break, it's really a sprint from here out. You know, this second half goes by really quick.
Yeah.
Where's the urgency level at? Is there pressure in that, or do you guys feel like you still have a little wiggle room to figure certain things out?
I won't speak for Tosh, but I don't think we have wiggle room to figure out anything else. I think that it's about, you know, it's a gut check game every game. I think everybody's trying to make the playoffs. Everybody's trying to be a contender for something. And I think it all comes down to who's going to be tougher, who's going to be the tougher team for 40 minutes. And if we want to be that, then we're going to have to keep going through these kinds of things to be that. But we can't keep taking steps back. And so, to your question, there ain't no more room for error. Have a good night.